Hey, left right out. What is it? The 20th, September 20th, Monday. Awesome, or not awesome. Well, awesome in a certain sense. Things are happening. Things are happening over the weekend. Things are happening today. I guess we go over financial news real quick. But there's a lot of things going on. But right currently, I'm looking at it. There's a market sell-off. People are losing their minds. Like, dude, it's if you look at it right now, the S&P is like down 105 points. It's like not even 2.5%. People are freaking out about it. Sure, you look at the VIX, whatever, which, if you're right, you've hedged against this because you know what we've been saying. There's going to be reverberations throughout the market when you get weird news because it's so overbought. In my opinion, you're so much cheap money in there. So when you get some bad news, you're going to have, you should have massive corrections. We're not even seeing that. It's not even a massive. It's not even a correction yet. This is like maybe a moderate pullback. We used to have these things back in the day. The last few years, or throughout what I call the succession of extreme monetary policy over the last 20 years, we kind of lost sight of actual corrections and pullbacks in a market. So I look at this, I'm like, okay, this is cool because maybe we're getting somewhere. Maybe there's some reality setting in. But here's what I look at. So we're looking at it. Dow's down 800 points, 105 on the S&P. I look at the 10-year. Okay, the 10-year U.S. yield, which is normally what they call the risk-free asset. I argue for the last, even since I was in college, that this is not a risk-free asset anymore. That the United States kind of tossed that around. They've thrown that in the trash can. So anyway, excuse me. It's at 1.3. Let's just say 1.299. And over the last few years, we've seen just massive moves in this thing. Granted, it is a manipulated market because the Federal Reserve's in there, but there is a lot of private sellers. There's a lot of sellers. There's a lot of private holders. There's a lot of pension funds. There's a lot of international funds, sovereign wealth funds that are recycling dollars into these debt instruments. So what you look for in that is if spike. Right now, we're seeing it actually is being bought up. So there's a little bit of safe haven play there. When you see the real thing, when you see the real initial crash that's going to, eventually head into the, even more like a hyperinflation type thing later on, you're going to see this market right here just come unglued. All right. So we haven't seen that yet. We can watch it. There hasn't been, it's pretty stable. It's being bought. People are putting dollars into the treasury market. So I'm not too worried about this. This is a garden variety correction. People are saying that this Evergrade or whatever it is, this real estate firm, holding company over there in China, they're defaulting on a few hundred million, or I believe it's like $300 million or something, possibly, or they're late on some interest payments, but the Chinese are already pumping money in there. They're going to bail them out. I mean, the whole economy over there is ran in a sense, or it's guided by the CCP. And not to say that it can't, like something like that, there's going to be a straw that breaks the camel's back. But this is news that's justifying a healthy sell-off, which anything but health in this market. But anyway, then of course, you got a little bit of the Fed meeting. But what's the Fed going to do? You think they're really going to taper? This gives them a little bit of justification. A little correction like this can be used as justification to maintain course on disastrous monetary policy. You see a little pop in gold. It's less than 1%. You're still under $1,800 an ounce. Of course, we know gold's a manipulated market along with silver. Silver's in a sell-off, which you'd think silver would also be in an uptrend in some of these other precious metals if they're in market environment. But like you look at palladium, you're looking at almost a correction of 6% today. And these precious metals, granted palladium and platinum or whatever, they're used in like vehicles or whatever. But I look at gold, it's only up 1%. Granted, that's what you look for. Gold is a long-term thing, even if it is manipulated. And it's not to say when you have a huge correction that gold's not going to go down. It should go down less. Now, unless you start actually having the Fed come in, and there's no way the Fed's going to be able to fight any of this type of inflation with just, whether lessening their QE type programs or even raising the interest rates up, slightly, because you're going to have to do a massive interest rate hike in order to stave off what we're seeing in this country. It says, like, headline CNBC, market soft worsens, Dow dropping, whatever, it's 8:30. You're looking at less than 2.5%, man. Call me when you get to 10%. We start hitting, trading stops, or whatever they call those. What do they call those? Because they have them in now. If you drop so much, they pause trading. That, we see the real panic in there. The VIX is up, which you can play that through a number of ETFs if you really want to get into a VIX, and I've done that myself in order to hedge other things. But anyway, so that's the financial news. You got China kind of like, maybe that is a Lehman moment for China. I don't know, but I'm not banking on that. I'm saying that this is just a sell-up. And I'm one of those guys that's like, hey, we're in a world of hurt financially, monetarily, and this country is in it's in a prolonged depression. Oh, so we'll stay on economic stuff because there is a good article, a guy, if you've not read any of his books, he has some interesting takes on things. I don't totally 100% agree with him on everything, but he has a general gist of what, along the same lines of a lot of Austrians. And it's Jim Rickards, and he's got some good books, and some of his books go into, like, if you read one in particular, because he was part of a group that did wargaming when the Pentagon added more of an economic side to their their wargaming strategies, or just to see what aspect, because you can use economics as warfare, right? And when he was there, I believe they showed that you can, like, pretty much cripple the United States with a few moves or something. It was pretty interesting. I can't recall, but that book was, man, what is it? It was something. If you look at some of his, he's got a number of books, all good reads and very insightful. But he's predicting that there will be no real recovery to 2045. But here's the thing. So when you go on, you can go look at his article up. That's cool. But more importantly, and some of the data that I was going to start looking up and putting together, he kind of just put it out there. And this is, I haven't pulled data to offset this, but this is just logic and reason, knowing that CPI numbers are faked, right? Or in a sense, they're manipulated. Let's call them manipulated. They're manipulated to an extent to pressure them down so that things don't look as bad. So anyway, we look at this thing. He has here growth has declined in 2008. Yeah, of course. Okay, so since between 2009 and 2019, recovery averaged an annual growth of 2.2%, well below the trend of 3.5 to 4.5%, and declined again by whatever blah blah blah. But here, within that 10-year span, average GDP growth of 2.2%. Now, in my opinion, if you use, depending on what kind of deflator you're using for that, we could actually have been flatlined or negative. I'm saying that that's an overestimate of actual GDP, and that we're actually been in this, a depressionary expanse since that financial crisis, maybe even before, because of the .com bubble. That was the precipice. That was the 29 moment, almost, in a sense. Maybe not direct correlation, but more of a rhyming of history. And we might even have something even greater, which we will have something even greater, because of all the malinvestment. Nothing has really been corrected, so we will have an even greater moment of inflection, like a 1929 moment. But anyway, he lays that out, and it kind of goes along the lines of, if if these numbers, these inflationary numbers, of the GDP deflators that is used to calculate real GDP is off, then these numbers, we could be in a flat line for a long time. And if you couple that with just IRS numbers about average income or median income, and you look at the disparity between purchasing power from 1971 on, there's some good graphs on that. You can see that we really haven't gone anywhere over an extended period of time. But he's got a good article about that. Anyway, we can move on from the economic stuff, because I want to touch on some other things. Okay, we know the Fed president's getting caught trading, and it turns out a lot of what they're buying, which I'm sure that happens all the time, but this is now this is news that there's some of these guys are buying the exact same things that the Fed is buying in order to in some of the relief stuff, for COVID relief things. It's pretty interesting. So, like, some muni bonds and various other debt instruments that they are actually purchasing. these guys have tens of millions, and then they come out, hey, by September 30th, we're gonna sell all this stuff, which means that, hey, we might have got out before this correction. I don't know, but then you got guys. Here's former Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin. He's got a private equity fund he's starting. Interestingly enough, a lot of those funds, I think it's $2.5 billion. A lot of those funds are coming from a Saudi wealth fund, I believe, which begs the question of the ties of the Saudi Arabian governments and with our own, with these people, which I've had a lot of questions about. And why are we such strong allies with Saudi Arabia? Why are we helping them when they're in that devastating war in Yemen, and crushing and killing civilians, and all kinds of travesties over there that isn't really talked about in the media? Plus, if you take on more of the conspiratorial view, the possible links of the Saudis with regards to the October shooting in Vegas a number of years ago, there's been extensive evidence that kind of links. There's a possibility that could have been actually tied to Saudi Arabia in a sense, not necessarily that shooter, but the actual shooting. A possible assassination attempt, but that's a whole nother story we can get into later. There's some good work out on that, with some evidence that ties them to that. But we can go on from there. I was spending a lot of time listening to this FDA panel thing with regard to booster shots, which is pretty interesting. 8 hours long. If you actually want to get real information that the government's making decisions on, you can get this stuff. It's out there. You don't have to listen to Rachel Maddow or Sean Hannity or whatever. You can, if you got the time, or you can at least get the clips or find out where the pertinent information is. It is a lot, but you can listen to it while you're doing whatever, and you can hear, these guys, these panels where they're coming up with their conclusions. Oh, the J6 rally. So the Justice for January 6th rally, there was like a weird thing that seemed more like a setup. And it turns out it's pretty funny because it almost certainly was. A lot of these protests are contrived, in my opinion. Some of them are legit, but even within the legit ones, there's operatives within there. And here's a funny story that was tweeted out. That I think there's 4 arrests during this whole thing. There wasn't very many people there. I think there's more reporters than there were actually people who showed up. And some of the people who showed up, if you look at them, 1, they crawled out of their mom's basement, and 2, some of them are dressed in such a conspicuous way. It's like, it reminds me of being at TBS, if you don't know, the basic school in Quantico, Virginia. It's for the Marine Corps, but there's also where the FBI Academy is as well, on Marine Corps base Quantico there. But the dress codes and whatnot for newly commissioned second lieutenants that are going to that school, and the FBI Academy might have something similar too. But they look with haircuts and the way they're dressed look awesome. Pretty along the lines, in my opinion, of being fresh second lieutenants. That's the first thing that popped in my mind. It's like, look at the haircuts, cool bro outfits for upper crust middle class dudes. That looks like freshly minted second lieutenant in the Marine Corps that's at TBS. But also that could be FBI, who knows? But that's what I thought. But anyway, so out of the 4 people I believe they arrested, they might have arrested more, but I know for sure this is, they arrested 1. It turns out he was an undercover FBI agent. It goes to the thing where they call agent provocateurs, where there's actually installed agents that are within certain groups like this that are actually, they're supposed to be observing and collecting evidence, but in some regards they are provoking and creating the precipice where these things go into some kind of violent action, or action is actually taken. And there's, if you know anybody that's in the police department or in the military that happens to be like an MP or something like that, or some kind of law enforcement, or even infantry dudes, I get some training on this too. When you talk about crowds, and you have your, I don't know I can't remember all the nomenclature or the terminology, but I've been through the training, I've done it myself, or trained people on this. But you usually, when you're observing the crowd or you're prepared, there's usually one dude that he challenges that line and once you cross that line, it's the line of departure almost. He actually ends up recruiting other people, and eventually, it cascades into what you don't want, either a violent protest or just that protest gets escalated into certain areas that you just don't want to deal with. But it tends to be some of these agent provocateurs, or when these agents actually push that line, and they're the ones that cause it to keep going. And we've seen that, and it seems like back in the day with the Wall Street protests, it was known agent provocateurs within there, and we're seeing it here. If you look at like the Proud Boys, it turns out their head dude, it's not, supposedly the white supremacist group, but the guy's like Puerto Rican or something, but he's also an FBI informant. There's a number of people that have been arrested, supposed terrorists. They were actually enabled by FBI agents. It's a astounding thing, and it needs to be looked at. But you can look that up, the J6 rally, because that just seems like it's a complete setup, contrived to make good media specter, just to drive clickbait for the Bidenites that think that Trump is the devil. But anyway, what else we got? There's a lot of stuff. Every day there's a lot of stuff. We'll see what happens. Ironically, let's go back to that Fed thing. So the Fed trading its own book, essentially. Fed members trading their own Federal Reserve book. And not, if you didn't know, the Fed has a trading desk too. But Powell's the one that called for the investigation. Turns out he's got ties to these muni bonds that are, I believe they're muni bonds that the Federal Reserve is actually buying as well. So the guy he's going to call an investigation on himself. Are you freaking out of your mind? I mean, there's no real oversight over these guys. They're just going to do whatever they're going to do. It's like a banana republic. It's corrupt. Of course, they're a private institution technically, but the same thing happens in Congress. I mean, these guys are front-running trades. They have information. If they're not, family members are getting contracts, or there's a plethora of corruption. It's astounding. But anyway, we'll leave it there for today because I want to keep it kind of short. There's a lot of things going on. Like I said, the market sell-off. It's a sell-off. It's not like anything bad yet. It could turn into that because a lot of times perception becomes reality. And we know fundamentals are really bad already. Fundamentals have been bad for years, and they're getting worse and worse. Underlying structural aspects of the economy are just devastated completely. And we're operating off of a printing press, essentially. But so you can look at the stuff. I'm not here to tell you everything. You need to go look at some of the things yourself. Like I said, other things that are going on. If you want to know about what happened with the booster stuff, you can go actually pull up the FDA thing. Now we got Pfizer coming out saying that they have they're seeking approval for the under 11, the 5 to 11 sticks. I'm not going to say it because I don't want to get pushed down on views. But you can get information without having to look at the alphabet networks. And I encourage you to do so because these guys are lying to you. They're basically a clickbait. They're news organizations now are clickbait operations, if you haven't figured that one out. But anyway, I'm in the midst of listening to this FDA deal. Like, I'm a couple hours in. It's not the most alluring presentations, I'll tell you this, but this is where these guys are making decisions off of. So you need to be educated. Anyway, I'll talk to you later. Peace.